The meeting room fell silent as Richard slapped the folder down on the conference table. His voice carried that manufactured concern managers practice in HR seminars. "You're under internal investigation," he announced, eyes sweeping across my colleagues before settling on me with unconcealed satisfaction. Everyone shifted away from me, a synchronized dance of self-preservation. 11 months of shared lunches, office jokes, and late-night deadlines evaporated in seconds. "For what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline surge. "Unauthorized system access, data transfers during unusual hours, excessive interest in accounts outside your department." He ticked off each accusation with theatrical precision. "Pretty serious stuff, Walter." The team avoided eye contact. Sylvia, who had borrowed my stapler just this morning with a smile, suddenly found his notepad fascinating. Omar, who had invited me to his son's birthday last weekend, examined his watch as if time might stop if he stared hard enough. "We've been monitoring your activities for weeks," Richard continued, clearly enjoying himself. "The evidence is substantial." My palms dampened, not from fear, from calculation. This was happening 3 weeks ahead of schedule. "I'd like to see this evidence," I said. "That's not how this works. Sign this." He slid a document across the table. "It's a simple admission of improper conduct. We'll make this discreet. You'll be escorted out today with 2 weeks severance." The alternative hung unspoken. Don't sign and they'd make an example of me. And if I refuse, his smile tightened. Then things get less pleasant, much less. The team watched this exchange like spectators at a car crash. Horrified but unable to look away. These people who'd praised my work yesterday now waited to see how thoroughly I'd be destroyed. I reached for my phone. "This isn't a negotiation," Richard snapped. "You don't get to call anyone." I ignored him, dialing with deliberate calm. "Hello, is this the FBI?" I maintained unwavering eye contact with Richard. "Yes, this is Agent Vance. The bridge is compromised." "I repeat, the bridge is compromised." Richard lunged across the table, reaching for my phone. "What the hell do you think? Code yellow at location Sunflower." I continued, dodging his grasp. "Request immediate backup." Chaos erupted. My supervisor knocked over his chair, scrambling to reach me. 2 senior managers bolted toward the door. The remaining team members froze, confusion replacing their judgment. "He is bluffing," Richard shouted, his face wreathing. "Security." I stood my ground. "Am I?" The security guard appeared at the doorway, looking uncertain. For one heart-topping moment, he moved toward me instead of Richard. Had my message failed? Was my team not in position? Then came the thunder of footsteps in the hallway. "Federal agents, everyone, stay where you are." Richard's face transformed from rage to disbelief as a dozen agents flooded the room. My actual colleagues, not the strangers I'd pretended to work alongside for nearly a year. "This is ridiculous," Richard backed away. "We were following standard procedure for employee misconduct." "Save it," said Agent Gomez, handcuffs already out. "We've heard enough over the wire he has been wearing." My colleagues stared at me, comprehension dawning in their eyes. I wasn't Walter from accounting after all. As Richard was read his rights, our eyes locked. His held something I'd waited 11 months to see. The realization that he wasn't untouchable after all. The beginning of justice for 843 people who had no idea what had been happening to their money. But this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. If this story has grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happens next. Drop a comment if you've ever had a workplace moment where everything suddenly changed. Now let me tell you who I really am and how this all started. My name is Walter Vance, and before I walked into that building 11 months ago, with a false resume and a wire, I was a forensic accountant turned federal agent specializing in financial crimes. Not the path I expected when I graduated with my accounting degree. But life has a way of reshaping our plans. I grew up watching my grandparents lose their retirement savings to a trusted financial advisor who disappeared overnight. I witnessed my hard-working father struggle to rebuild what had been stolen from them. That sense of helplessness shaped me, carved determination into my bones. When the pattern of complaints about Alpine Financial Services reached our office, something about it triggered that old memory. Hundreds of ordinary people, teachers, nurses, construction workers, reporting mysterious fees and vanishing funds. Small amounts, typically just enough to fly under the radar for most people. Nobody would steal just $50. My supervisor had said when I first brought the pattern to his attention. They would if they took $50 from thousands of people, I'd countered. 3 weeks of preliminary investigation revealed something bigger than we'd imagined. A sophisticated scheme targeting specific customer demographics, mainly older clients, immigrants with language barriers, and young adults with their first accounts, people less likely to question authority or understand the fine print. The team was skeptical about sending someone undercover. White-collar investigations typically involved warrants, not wires. But traditional approaches had failed with Alpine. They were too careful with their paper trail. We need someone on the inside. I argued someone who can track the money as it moves. That someone became me, Walter Wilson. Recent transplant with decent credentials and an unassuming manner. Perfect for a mid-level accounting position at Alpine Financial's main branch. Getting hired was the easy part. What followed was months of methodical work, building trust while hunting for evidence. I'd arrive early, make coffee for the team, volunteer for extra assignments. I learned about Sylvia's struggles with fertility treatments and Omar's pride in his son's science fair projects. I became the office friend too, reliable, sympathetic, unremarkable, all while secretly documenting the elaborate system Richard had designed. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Small fees automatically generated on certain types of accounts. Administrative charges applied and then reversed, leaving a tiny percentage behind too small for most customers to notice on monthly statements. Systematic rounding in the bank's favor. Each method yielding modest sums that, when multiplied across thousands of accounts, produced millions. The money flowed through a labyrinth of internal transfers before disappearing into investment accounts registered to shell companies. The average customer losing funds would never connect these tiny deductions to the luxury cars in the executive parking lot or the performance bonuses awarded quarterly. By month 3, I had confirmed the scheme existed. By month 6, I had identified the key players. By month 9, I had mapped the money trail. The operation was scheduled to conclude next month with enough evidence to ensure convictions until Richard moved up the timeline by announcing my investigation. What I didn't know until later was that a routine security scan had flagged my after-hours access. Nothing conclusive, just enough to raise questions. Richard, always protective of his system, decided to eliminate the risk by making an example of me. He'd done it before. 3 employees in the past 5 years had been publicly accused of misconduct, forced to sign away their right to challenge their termination, and escorted out the perfect way to remove threats while sending a message to everyone else. Don't ask questions, except this time he targeted the wrong person. After the arrests, I sat in a debriefing room surrounded by my actual teammates. The adrenaline crash left me exhausted. "You did good work, Vance," Agent Gomez said, sliding a coffee across the table. 8 months of evidence gathered. 17 individuals identified in the scheme. Approximately $12 million siphoned from customer accounts. "The customers," I said, "when do they get their money back?" "Asset recovery is already working on it. The tricky be identifying all the victims. Some probably never noticed, like Mrs. Loretta Chen, who came in monthly to question his statement, only to be patronizingly told he must be misremembering his balance, or Daniel Ortiz, who was made to feel financially illiterate when he questioned a series of unusual charges. The elderly couple who couldn't afford medication because their account was mysteriously short every month. The system counted on shame and self-doubt to keep victims quiet. "We'll need your testimony," Gomez continued. "This won't be quick or easy. Financial crimes rarely are." And the eye nodded, already preparing for the long road ahead. The arrests were just the beginning of a case that would take months, possibly years, to fully prosecute. What I didn't anticipate was how empty I would feel walking out of Alpine Financial for the last time. For all the wrongs committed there, I had built relationships, artificial ones based on a false identity, but relationships nonetheless. I had watched Sylvia receive positive pregnancy test results and celebrated with the office. I had helped Omar brainstorm science project ideas. They weren't complicit in the scheme, just oblivious to it. Yet, they had turned on me instantly when Richard pointed his finger. That night, alone in my apartment, I removed the pictures of Walter's family, stock photos of people I'd never met, and packed away his life. I scrubbed off the light makeup I'd worn daily to look less like myself. I called my actual father for the first time in months without having to use coded language. "Is it over?" he asked. "The undercover, now comes the hard part. Will you be in danger?" I thought about Richard's face as he was led away, the cold calculation in his eyes even as the handcuffs clicked shut. "No," I lied. "It's just paperwork from here." But something told me this was far from over. Men like Richard don't go down easily, and I had just helped take down 17 of them at once. The trial preparations consumed the next 3 months of my life. Endless meetings with prosecutors, reviewing evidence, preparing testimony. The case had expanded beyond Alpine Financial to include 2 partner institutions implicated in the money trail. 23 defendants now, not 17. I was back to being Walter Vance, federal agent, but I couldn't shake the ghost of Walter Wilson. Sometimes I'd catch myself responding to that name, or unconsciously applying the subtle makeup techniques I'd used to alter my appearance. Identity is more fragile than most people realize. 6 weeks after the arrests, I was reviewing transcripts when Gomez knocked on my office door. "Heads up, Richard hired Griffin Perry." My stomach tightened. Perry was a defense attorney known for 2 things: exorbitant fees and ruthlessly discrediting witnesses. "They're claiming entrapment," Gomez continued, "and they filed motions to suppress almost everything we gathered, arguing the undercover operation wasn't properly authorized. That's ridiculous. We followed every protocol." "Of course we did, but they only need to create doubt." He hesitated. "And there's something else. They're digging into your past, your grandparents' situation, suggesting you had a personal vendetta." I set down my pen. "That was 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago. Perry doesn't care. He's building a narrative that you manipulated evidence because of personal bias." Later that evening, as I left the federal building, a black sedan pulled alongside me, the window lowered to reveal Omar's familiar face. "Walter, Agent Vance, can we talk?" Against better judgment, I got in. "I didn't know," he said immediately, "about any of it." "I swear, I believe you. Some of us have been questioned." His hands fidgeted with his keys. "They make it sound like we should have known, like we were all it." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that we processed what we were given, that nobody explained the overall system." He swallowed hard. "My wife thinks I could be charged. We have a second baby coming in December." This was the collateral damage of financial crimes. Not just the direct victims, but the innocent bystanders caught in the aftermath. People like Omar who process numbers without understanding their significance. "If you cooperated honestly, you should be fine," I assured him. "There's something else." His voice dropped. "Sylvia got a call from Richard last week from jail. He was asking questions about you, what you accessed, who you contacted." My pulse quickened. "What did he say?" "Nothing helpful, I think. But Vance, he's not the only one making calls." The week before the arrests, there were these executives visiting from the partner bank. They spent hours in closed meetings with Richard. One of them, he keeps calling the office, asking about server backups and archive access. I thanked Omar for the information and recommended he speak directly to the prosecution team. As he drove away, I called Gomez. "We need to check on Alpine's external partners. They're getting nervous." 2 days later, a key witness, Alpine's former IT director, who had agreed to testify about how the fee system was programmed, was found unconscious in his home. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater. He survived but suffered memory impairment, affecting his recall of specific technical details. "Just a coincidence," the local police said. The prosecution disagreed and placed 3 other witnesses in protective arrangements. I received additional security protocols, including a temporary relocation to a different apartment. "They're desperate," Gomez reassured me. "This means our case is strong," but doubt had taken root. Our meticulous operation was under siege from multiple directions. Legal challenges, witness intimidation, media, leaks questioning the investigation's integrity. The worst blow came during the preliminary hearing. Perry had somehow obtained internal emails between my supervisor and me from before the operation, emails discussing my personal interest in the case. "Agent Vance." Perry addressed me on the stand. "Would you say your judgment regarding Alpine Financial was impartial and unbiased?" "Yes." He produced the emails. Then perhaps you can explain why you wrote. And I quote, "I've seen this pattern before. It destroyed my family. I won't let it happen to others." The judge allowed the line of questioning despite prosecution objections. "You created an elaborate fiction to infiltrate Alpine," Perry continued. "Lived as Walter Wilson for nearly a year. Isn't it possible that your desire for justice, or perhaps revenge for your grandparents, colored your interpretation of routine financial operations?" "No. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence you selectively gathered while operating under false pretenses. By the time I left the stand, the damage was done. The defense had painted me as a vigilante with a personal vendetta, not a professional agent following evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The case wasn't lost. The financial paper trail remained damning, but my credibility had been undermined. Somehow, Perry had accessed emails that should have been confidential. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Parking level 3, blue sedan, 10 minutes. Come alone." Every training protocol warned against such meetings, but something told me this was important. I tucked my service weapon into my jacket and took the elevator down. The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily silent. The blue sedan sat in a corner space, engine off. As I approached, the driver's door opened. Sylvia stepped out, looking nothing like the friendly coworker I'd known. His face was drawn, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "I shouldn't be here," he said without greeting. "But I can't sleep. I keep seeing Mrs. Reynolds' face." "Who was that?" "The old woman who came in crying last year because his account was short for the third time. Richard had me tell he must be confused." I believed him. Then his voice cracked. "He died 2 months later. His son came in to close his account and mentioned he'd been skipping heart medication because he thought he couldn't afford it." And I remained silent, letting his continue. "After you were arrested, after they tried to fire you, I started looking more closely at the accounts I handled. The patterns you must have seen, he handed me a USB drive. This was supposed to be destroyed during the system upgrade last week. It's the original programming directive for the fee structure with Richard's annotations. And this he passed over a legal notepad is dates and times of calls Richard made from detention, including 3, to someone named Simon at Westward Partners. Westward Partners was the investment firm we suspected was laundering the proceeds but couldn't prove direct connection. Why are you giving me this? Because I processed the paperwork when Mrs. Reynolds closed his checking account to pay for his wife's funeral 4 years ago. I helped him set up automatic payments for his bills, including his prescriptions. I was the system that killed him." His voice hardened, "and because yesterday someone left a picture of my house on my car windshield. No message, just the picture." After Sylvia left, I immediately took the materials to Gomez. The USB drive contained exactly what we needed. Direct evidence linking Richard to the deliberate creation of the fraudulent fee system with notes calculating expected revenue. "This changes everything," Gomez said. "And we need to get Dana protection immediately." But when we sent agents to his home, he was gone. Packed bag, cell phone left behind. His wife said he'd received a phone call and left immediately, telling him to take their son to his father's house, upstate. The next morning, Perry withdrew several key motions in the case. By afternoon, 3 defendants had approached the prosecution about potential cooperation deals. "They're turning on each other," Gomez said. "Classic response when the evidence becomes overwhelming. We've got them." For the first time in weeks, I felt the case solidifying again. The prosecution's confidence grew with each new cooperation agreement. Even the judge seemed increasingly skeptical of the defense's arguments. Then Sylvia's car was found at a bus station 50 miles away. No surveillance footage, no bus ticket purchased in his name, no sign of where he had gone, just his empty vehicle with a stack of client account statements in the trunk, each annotated with highlighting and sticky notes identifying unusual fee patterns. More evidence for our case, but at what cost? That night, as I reviewed the new materials, my apartment buzzer rang. The security detail checked the visitor. A delivery courier with a certified letter requiring signature. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with an address in an industrial area outside the city, tomorrow's date and a time 9:00 p.m., no signature, no explanation. Every instinct warned me this was a trap. I called Gomez. "Absolutely not," he said after I explained. We'll send a surveillance team, but you're not going anywhere near that address. I agreed, but something about the precision of the note bothered me. The handwriting was familiar. At 8:30 the next evening, Gomez called. Surveillance reports an abandoned warehouse. No activity, no signs of recent entry. At 8:45, I received a text from an unknown number. Time running out. Simon knows about Vance, not just Walter. My real name hadn't been made public. The connection between Walter Vance and Walter Wilson was known only to the investigation team and the defendants, and apparently to whoever sent this message. At 8:55, against direct orders and my better judgment, I left my apartment through the service entrance, avoiding my security detail. I took a taxi to within 3 blocks of the address, then approached on foot, service weapon drawn. The warehouse appeared exactly as described, dark, abandoned, no signs of life. I circled the perimeter once before, approaching a side door left slightly ajar. Inside, emergency lights cast weak illumination across an empty storage floor. A single chair sat in the center with a manila envelope on it. I swept each corner of the space before approaching the chair. The envelope contained a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The account connections you couldn't find. Run. The last word was barely processed when I heard the mechanical click of a door locking, followed by the unmistakable hiss of gas. I sprinted toward the exit, already feeling lightheaded. The door wouldn't budge as consciousness began to slip. I heard distant sirens, then nothing. I woke in a hospital bed with Gomez standing over me, his expression oscillating between relief and fury. You disobeyed direct orders. The evidence would have been worthless if you were dead. He softened slightly, but it turns out to be incredibly valuable. The USB contains the complete roadmap of how Alpine, Westward Partners, and Pinnacle Trust moved the stolen funds, account numbers, transaction dates, everything we couldn't find. Who left it? We don't know, but they also called 911, reporting a gas leak at the warehouse. That's the only reason you're alive. As I recovered, the case against Richard and his associates strengthened daily. New witnesses came forward, emboldened by the mounting evidence. Former employees revealed how they'd been compartmentalized, each seeing only pieces of the scheme without understanding the whole. But questions remained: who had tried to kill me, who had saved me, and where was Sylvia? 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Simon Wilcox, CEO of Westward Partners and the alleged endpoint of the money trail, was found dead in his vacation home. Apparent suicide, complete with typed note confessing to knowledge of the fraudulent scheme. Too neat, too convenient, and entirely too suspicious given the timing. The prosecution team worked overnight reassessing the case strategy. With Wilcox dead, certain evidence chains were compromised. His convenient suicide had effectively cut off the investigation's path to potentially bigger players. I was reviewing the updated brief when my office phone rang. Agent Vance. The voice was distorted, unrecognizable. The game isn't over. Tomorrow, check the witness list again. Before I could respond, they hung up. The next morning, an amendment to the defense witness list arrived. Denna Miller, former Alpine employee, now prepared to testify that the unusual account activities were routine industry practices, not fraud. The woman who had provided crucial evidence against Richard was now appearing as a defense witness. The prosecution team scrambled to understand this development. Sylvia, who had risked everything to provide evidence against Alpine, was now listed as a defense witness. The woman who'd shown me account statements with highlighted fraud patterns was suddenly prepared to testify they were routine industry practices. It doesn't make sense, I told Gomez. He was terrified of these people. He received threats. People change sides when they're scared enough, he replied. But I could see doubt in his eyes, too, or when they're paid enough. The lead prosecutor, Vivian, was more blunt. If he contradicts his earlier evidence, our case loses significant credibility. The defense will paint all our witnesses as unreliable. We spent hours strategizing how to counter Sylvia's potential testimony, but without knowing what he planned to say, we were shooting in the dark. That night, my apartment buzzer rang again. The security detail reported another courier delivery. This one contained a hotel key card with a room number written on the sleeve. 714. I recognized the logo. A mid-range hotel about 15 minutes from my apartment. Against all protocol, but with a heads up to Gomez this time, I went. Room 714 was empty when I entered, weapon drawn. The television was on, playing local news coverage of the upcoming trial. On the bed lay a burner phone that began ringing the moment I stepped inside. "You came alone?" A voice I recognized immediately despite electronic distortion. "Yes. Where are you, Sylvia?" "Not important. Listen carefully. I don't have much time. Tomorrow in court, I need you to ask me about Account Review Protocol 16. "What's that?" "Something that doesn't exist. When I hesitate, press me on it. Ask if it was the quarterly compliance check." "Dina, what's happening? Are you safe?" "No, none of us are. They have my son, Walter." His voice cracked, the first time I'd heard his use my real name. They've been watching his preschool for weeks. Yesterday, they sent me a picture of his on the playground with a man standing nearby. Their message was clear: we can protect you both. No, they have people everywhere. The only way through this is to follow their script tomorrow, then destroy them from the inside. The line went silent for several seconds. "I need to go. Just remember, Protocol 16. Make it seem like you expected me to know about it." The call ended before I could ask anything else. Back at my apartment, I debated whether to share this development with the prosecution team. If Dana was being coerced, we needed to intervene. But if revealing his contact put his son at risk, I decided on a compromise, telling Gomez about the meeting, but only that Sylvia seemed under duress and might not be voluntarily helping the defense. "We should postpone," he suggested. No, he was clear that we need to proceed, but carefully. The next morning, the courtroom hummed with tension. Media filled the gallery, drawn by the high-profile financial crimes and the drama of an undercover operation. The defendant sat in a row, Richard in the center, impeccably dressed despite months in detention, flanked by his co-conspirators. When Sylvia entered, I barely recognized him. Gone was the warm, slightly frazzled working father I'd known. This woman moved with rigid precision, his face blank, eyes never settling on any single point in the room. Defense counsel called his to the stand first. "Miss Miller, you worked at Alpine Financial for 7 years, correct?" "Yes. And during that time you processed thousands of customer accounts?" "Yes. In your professional opinion, were the fee structures at Alpine unusual or outside industry standards?" Sylvia hesitated for a microcond. "No, they were consistent with standard practices." For 40 minutes. He systematically undermined our case, describing the fee system as transparent and appropriate, claiming any irregularities were customer misunderstandings or system limitations. With each answer, the prosecution's case seemed to weaken. When cross-examination began, Vivian started with basic foundation questions, establishing Sylvia's role and responsibilities. Then he nodded subtly to me. My cue. I slid his a note with my question. He read it, frowned slightly, but proceeded. "Miss Miller, I'd like to ask about Account Review Protocol 16. You were responsible for implementing that, correct?" Dana's composure cracked, just as he'd predicted. He hesitated. "I'm not familiar with that protocol." "Really? It was the quarterly compliance check you oversaw." "No." He glanced toward the defense table, where Richard was watching intently. "There was no such protocol. Are you certain?" "Because we have documentation suggesting otherwise." Sylvia's eyes darted toward the gallery, then back to Vivian. "May I see this documentation?" As Vivian approached with a manila folder containing blank papers, a bluff, Dana's hand trembled slightly as he reached for it. "For the record," Vivian said, "this document describes a systematic review process for accounts flagged for unusual fee applications. A process you personally managed." Sylvia studied the empty folder, then looked up. Something had changed in his expression, a resolve I hadn't seen before. "There was no Protocol 16, he said clearly, but there was a different system, one that Mr. Mitchell required certain employees to implement without documentation." The defense lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection. This goes beyond the scope of the question." "Your Honor," Vivian countered. "The witness is clarifying his answer about account review procedures." The judge allowed Sylvia to continue. What followed was 2 hours of devastating testimony, as Sylvia methodically exposed the entire fraud scheme, producing handwritten notes he'd kept hidden from both sides. He explained how Richard had compartmentalized the operation, ensuring no single employee saw the complete picture, how threats and manipulative bonuses kept questions minimal. "And why are you sharing this now?" Vivian asked. "When you previously agreed to testify for the defense, Sylvia looked directly at Richard for the first time, because my son deserves to see what honesty looks like, even when it's terrifying. The defense attorney attempted damage control during redirect, suggesting Sylvia was lying to avoid prosecution herself, but the detailed records he'd secretly maintained proved impossible to discredit. When court adjourned for the day, Sylvia was immediately taken into protective custody along with his family. The prosecution team was euphoric. That was masterful, Vivin told me. How did you know to ask about a non-existent protocol? Just intuition, I lied. But our victory was short-lived. That evening, a senior Justice Department official requested an urgent meeting with our team. He arrived with 2 internal affairs officers. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Defense counsel has filed a motion alleging evidence tampering and witness coaching." "That's absurd," Gomez protested. "Maybe, but they have hotel security footage showing Agent Vance meeting with Dina Miller last night, despite Ms. Miller being on the defense witness list." Every eye in the room turned to me. "Agent Vance," the internal affairs officer said, "did you meet with prosecution witness Sylvia Miller without disclosure to the court or defense?" The trap was elegant. If I admitted the meeting, I could be removed from the case for witness tampering. If I denied it, the video evidence would discredit me entirely. "Ms. Miller contacted me," I said carefully. "He indicated he was under duress and that his testimony was being coerced through threats to his child. And you didn't report this immediately because he specifically warned that official intervention would endanger his son." The senior official sighed. "The defense is moving to have all evidence gathered during your undercover operation thrown out, claiming it's all potentially tainted by your conduct." "That's ridiculous. The financial records stand on their own, perhaps, but the judge has ordered a hearing on the matter tomorrow morning. Until then, you are suspended from all case activities." After they left, Gomez stayed behind. "This was coordinated," he said quietly.